You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
We're your hosts for this show. You know, it's funny. I mean, it's actually been a couple of weeks since we've been able to come on live. I almost kind of forgot how we do this.
I was about to say the same thing, actually.
You know, I was getting ready to do this. I'm like, man, how do we actually intro this? What do we do? You know, and it wasn't like I actually watched one of our previous shows to figure it out. But yeah, man, it looks like we got, you know, some Obi Wan cameos, Obi Wan news, things like that going. Because of course we're like maybe a month away from the show. Actually, almost exactly, right? Because
because
what's today? What's
comes
the date?
out the 27th.
This is the 29th. Yep. So, yeah, we're getting close. And I had seen actually another trailer for the movie. Now, I don't know. You know, it's so hard when you're watching YouTube and things like that. It's so hard to tell what's actually official because people do a really good job at making all these fan-made trailers and stuff. But the second trailer looked official. And given that we just had CinemaCon, which, of course, there were some things that came out. I shared with you the Top Gun thing, how everybody's just losing their minds over it and saying it's great. What else did they have? Oh, man, there's like some other things that came out during CinemaCon, too. And I was actually out in Vegas this past week, which is the reason why I couldn't do the show on Monday. So we will get to that show. We postponed our Monday show at least 2 or 3 times. So it's coming. It's coming, you know, this Monday. We should be on. I hesitate to promise because who knows what comes up. But I was in Vegas actually at the same time that CinemaCon was going on. I was there for NAB. And it was funny because it's Star Wars related, and I think I texted this to you, and maybe we'll do a show on it at some point. There was they were demonstrating some jib or crane or some thing or whatever that's been used in Avatar and a couple other upcoming movies, the new Lord of the Ring of Power series. And it was called Star Wars Dark
World.
Was it?
Was it Dark World?
I don't know. Let me see. I want to get this right. It's like if I'm going to bring this up.
I know. It sounds like they ripped off like Thor, but
yeah, it was I just got to find. And then of course, you know, the problem is that you and I text so much that I actually have to go up you know, past all the Top Gun stuff.
Dark Order.
Dark Order. Thank you. Hey,
sorry, I got you, man.
Voyager's with us today. What's going on, Voyager? Voyager says, I don't believe you. Yeah, and actually, you know, it's funny because when I first texted that whole thing to you, I just happened to see it, right? It just came into this, they were just showing all this, you know, this whole looping thing about stuff that's been in there and stuff that they've done and stuff that they use this piece of equipment. And yeah, they just had this thing called Star Wars Dark Order. So I kind of want to explore that at some point too, because nobody's made any announcements on that. But yet there it was, and I mean, it was official Star Wars logo and stuff, and I have a feeling that these guys, this company that makes this crane and this jib, where they use this thing, I don't really think they were supposed to say anything. I think this is just part of their little demo reel or whatever, and they just had the logo, you know, so it's really interesting. But we are very close to the Obi Wan series, and we wanted to talk today about some of the cameos because this has actually been making the rounds quite a bit. Actually, there's been talk of a lot of cameos that could be popping up in this series, and I'm really curious on what's finally going to come out in this show. I mean, I don't know. What are you thinking about just the whole idea of, because we already seen the trailer, at least the official first teaser one. We already know that. We've seen some of the other stuff. Do you actually think that if they try to cram a bunch of cameos in here, it could actually ruin the show? Or do you think that, hey, it would be good to have cameos from some familiar characters?
Well, I think, once again, it goes back to our whole, mantra on this show, as long as it serves the story, So from what I'm hearing, what I've been reading, I should say, Deborah Chow, who's the showrunner, director of Obi Wan, she's basically saying that this show is basically, kind of chronicling Obi Wan's journey, and in that process, I mean, it would make sense that you would see certain people, whether they be current or in flashback form, depending on who we were dealing with. I do really want to see. Uh, One of the things I was looking forward to when I found out they're actually doing the whole Obi-Wan series, I was really curious to see if they were actually going to bring up Qui-Gon, because that's one of the final things Yoda told Obi-Wan is like, going to Tatooine, more training I have from your old master. Obi-Wan's like, Qui-Gon, it's just like, okay. So, and Liam Neeson's always wanted to come back and play him anyway. So
Yeah, but then there
that would
was
be
that
cool.
article though that came out not too long ago, which honestly I think that's just to throw people off the track, where he started saying that he would love to revisit Star Wars and Qui-Gon, but it would have to be a film. That he's kind of a snob, and that for him it would actually have to be a film. So I don't know if that was basically his way of saying, "Hey guys, I'm not really in it," or if this is just something to throw us off the track, or what.
Well,
Because
misdirection, yeah.
yeah, because I mean, these guys are notorious for doing stuff like this. They, and what's funny is we as Star Wars fans a lot of times fall for it all the time.
Mhm.
I mean, every single time somebody denies something or whatever, especially if they're convincing enough, and they are actors. So essentially, it really does serve to throw us off the track. Now, granted, that's part of the fun, because one of the things that I think is missing in Star Wars today, as much as they're trying to guard it and protect it, is that surprise. That element of
Yeah.
surprise, that sense of wonder, that there's very little information and it comes out and you're just blown away by it. And I'm the guy that actually loves spoilers, by the way. Spoilers don't bother me at all. Some people get really, really violent about it, actually, but I mean, obviously, there's times where I've watched movies and I've just been like, man, I'm so glad that I didn't read anything about it, or, nobody spoiled it for me. But at the same time, when people watch stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, well, what happens? And they're like, well, at first they try to skirt around
Not
it and
tell
maybe,
you, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Just like give me a little bit of the information, kind of tease me, but and then I'm just the guy that's just like, look, man, just tell me everything,
Mhm.
Voyager basically says, spoilers don't bother me either. Well, you're probably one of the few, because honestly, seems like especially on YouTube, it's gotten really bad. I mean, you watch these other videos and, they have to put spoiler free or spoiler alerts and all
We
kinds
even
of
have to
stuff.
do it at times,
We have. And the thing that's been funny about it, and that's really what I was getting to, was the fact that even with us, there's been things that we've said and people have called us out on it. And, it's not like we got a million viewers, so it's really
Mhm.
interesting how there's a lot of people that feel different ways. Some people actually want and enjoy spoilers. Some people don't necessarily care either way. And then there's other people that are just vehemently anti-spoiler. And if you say anything, and that's the problem, a lot of times you have to, not that I'm trying to go down another rabbit hole here, but you have to wonder, well, what constitutes a spoiler? Because everybody's different. Everybody has a different opinion about that. And that's especially true with this Obi Wan series or any new Star Wars thing, is that when you're a discussion show like we are, and there's a lot of speculation going on, there's some things that we end up finding out. And I mean, you and I think, have been doing a really good job about, our whole channel is spoiler. I mean, I think I think for Rise of Skywalker, we did actually do a spoiler-free review.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only because it happened to coincide that we had the live show, like either the day after or something, that we actually saw the movie, and it was really early. So just to give it some time, we did like the Friday show was our spoiler-free review, and then I think the Monday show was, all the spoilers. But generally speaking, our whole thing has always been, look, we're a spoiler channel. There's no such thing as spoiler-free for us. So you have to be careful, but given that I understand that there are people like Liam Neeson might be saying things to throw people off the track in order to protect that element of surprise. So, that it doesn't ruin it for people.
Yeah. I mean, I would just really like to see that, because I think that's a very integral part, especially because, you and I always make the joke about, becoming a Force Ghost is not one of those things that like you can just really just practice. It's not like you can just,
you got to get it right the first time.
Like the first, yeah, exactly. So like when he does it, in A New Hope, you just gotta like, man, I hope this works. You gotta wonder Obi-Wan is just really that confident in doing it.
Well, I think the funniest thing, I think the funniest thing that we brought up was, and nobody ever really thought about it too. I remember when we brought this up, it was the first time that I had even thought about it. And keep in mind, I saw the stupid thing in the theaters back in '77. Is that after, Vader slices Obi-Wan in half, and he just kind of like, his robe just drops, he just like disappears, and he's all stepping on the rope. Like that joke that we made about him going back to Palpatine and go, hey, listen, have you ever seen this before? Because, and this is especially backed up by now after seeing the prequels, because for the longest time, we assumed that was just the effects of a lightsaber, that if it cuts through you or whatever, it just disintegrates you.
Mm-hmm.
The concept
like a Romulan disruptor or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. And thank you, because every show we always have to make some random Star Trek, reference. But the thing that I find funny about it is the fact that it isn't until The Empire Strikes Back that we go, okay, he's coming back in some sort of spiritual form. I'm trying to remember when I actually even first heard the term Force Ghost. I don't remember if we called them that back then or not. That's one thing that, you start getting on in years. Things start to escape.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, just because I remember watching it when I was a kid and, VHS. And when I first saw it, I was like, why is he stepping on it? Like, is he trying to make sure he's dead? Like, there's nothing there. Like, what is he stepping on it for? And I had no clue that, of course, and then, of course, when you hear him saying, run, Luke, run. I'm like, wait, he can still talk to him now? Like, I was confused. And it really, well, like you said, until Empire, you realize, oh, now he's like in this whole spirit form. And you're like, I thought
that's
like
a good point, too.
Hallucination thing. And, I mean, it was just because,
no,
Luke
absolutely
passed out on Hoth. So I'm like, maybe he's like hallucinating that he's hearing Ben, but then
right,
it's just all that. But
that, I mean, just to back up, you actually bring up a good point here, because there's the disembodied voice. That's kind of the first thing that we hear at the end of A New Hope. Where he's telling Luke to run, and then he's sort of guiding him in the ship and all that, and everything. And of course, the other joke, where he switches off the targeting computer, and the guys are like, "Oh, you switch off your targeting computer," and he's like, "Nah, I'm all right." And they're like, "Okay, whatever." And it's like, you would think that those guys would be trying a little harder, like, maybe you ought to turn that computer back on, considering you're the last guy out there, and our entire survival depends on whether or not you make this shot.
And it's already in range, so
yeah. And this is where it goes. This is where you have to understand it's science fiction fantasy. It's not straight up science fiction, because there's no way in the world that these guys would have that reaction. They would just be like, "Oh no, I'm okay." It's like, "Oh, well, all right, great." Meanwhile, you got this voice beckoning in your head, the Death Star is in range in, 30 seconds or whatever. You might go, well, you know what? Could you just, even if you don't use it, could you just turn it back on?
It just makes us all feel
it makes us all feel better. Maybe you might want to use it. I mean, you might be approaching the thing and go, I probably should have turned that computer back on. Just have it on as a backup. But
yeah, so I think the whole Qui-Gon thing would be cool. The other person I would think would be cool to run into, honestly, will be Watto. Because I think Watto is, because of his relationship, like, of course, Obi-Wan knows his relationship with Watto. And, of course, Watto, sees Anakin come back as a Jedi. And he's just like, oh, yeah, you sprouted. And, man, you're a Jedi now. Cool, I got some guys you could probably help me with. Like, he's all trying to extort Anakin now at that point.
I gotta say,
But
I
then
think
now,
that was smart.
Which part?
Well, I think the whole thing, because one of the things that I had always thought back when I saw the Phantom Menace was that, Watto, even though Watto was never really mean to them, I mean, as far as an owner of slaves go, he was probably pretty cool to everybody, but it's one of those things where you think of like, man, this is Darth Vader. You are in so much trouble when this guy. And so when they actually did the thing to where Anakin revisited Watto as a full-on Jedi, there's part of you that are like, okay, is he going to go back there and just be like, listen, man, because remember, he was under the impression when he was a kid that the Jedi would rescue him and then go back and free his mother and maybe everybody else, which of course didn't happen. And so seeing how he went back and got some revenge on the Tusken Raiders that killed his mother, you would think that, hey, maybe he might go back and... I never thought he was going to kill Watto, but I thought he might, maybe force choke him or, just kind of freak him out a little bit. But actually, he kind of went back, and Watto had somewhat of a fatherly kind of a vibe toward him. And Anakin responded that way. I mean, even, because this is Revenge of the Sith, so it was, I think so, or was it Attack of the Clones?
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. But even still, he's kind of a full-blown guy. So it would actually be really cool if Darth Vader actually...
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say... I don't think Vader would show up, but I can understand, like, if Obi-Wan goes into town and he runs into Watto because he needs some parts or he might need something. And, for Watto to find out, because, at this point in time, the Empire has fully taken over.
Right.
And... you have, and Darth Vader is the enforcer. He's the one who's everybody kind of knows about him, per se, or they know of him. So, the whole legend of the Sith and everything like that, for Obi-Wan to kind of have to go back and tell Watto, like, and Watto just might be like, hey, where's Anakin?
Yeah, it's like, all about that. Trust me, you don't want to run into him. You don't want to run into him now.
Yeah, it's a different thing now. Now I have to kind of explain my fail, and that's one of those things. I think that's one of those moments where he has to explain his failure, because Watto is going to be looking like, well, how did that happen? You're a Jedi. How did you let him go? And like, I can just see how that could even force Obi-Wan back in kind of into a depressive state. Just because, once again, when you actually have to say some things out loud, it becomes more real to you. And so, him running into Watto would be a cool cameo, I think.
Yeah, now, that would be cool. Another one that I've read about, because like I said, I tried to look around and see, were there any other ones that were either, being speculated about, or maybe there's some concrete stuff. And so far, the only other concrete one that I actually ran across that seems to be mildly confirmed, I still haven't really been able to trace it down too much, but according to what I was reading, Princess Leia is supposed to be in this as a 10-year-old. And she's supposedly kidnapped, and Obi-Wan has to go rescue her, and that's why he goes off planet. And then there's going to be almost like a Grogu-like character as far as being adorable. It's this little droid that it's kind of like a little flying saucer that kind of flies above her and stuff, and it's supposed to be adorable or whatever. It's supposed to have the Grogu effect, I guess. But that's the whole catalyst, for lack of a better term, of Obi-Wan actually leaving Tatooine and feeling compelled to go rescue her. Because if you think about it, we knew that he was going to go off-world, obviously, and then, I don't know why, I keep forgetting the planet's name. Well, I know why, because I forget all this stuff. But
That's what, the Hong Kong looking one?
yeah, the Hong Kong looking one. And it was kind of like, okay, you could think of a couple of different scenarios of maybe why this would happen, but what would be so compelling that it would cause Obi-Wan to essentially stop watching over Luke temporarily in order to go off-world? Now, one could be that, and I think you brought this up on another show, where you had speculated, well, maybe it was because the Inquisitors were getting a little close, and he didn't want them to accidentally find Luke. So, to throw him off the trail, he goes off planet so they'll follow him, and adventure ensues. And that could very well be the case, too. But I could see if this is actually true, because who knows what's true on the internet anymore, right? So if this is true, I think it could be a really compelling thing, because it does tie things together, because obviously Leia knows who Obi-Wan is, because in A New Hope, she's all like, oh, well, General Kenobi, you fought with my father in the Clone Wars. It's like, well, how did she know all this? I mean, even if she heard the stories, it seemed very personal, because even when Luke said that he was with Ben, she's like, oh, you're with, I mean, she got all excited about it. So it's almost like she knew him. And this would basically open that door.
You bring up a good point, because if you recall, on the Death Star, Luke called him Ben Kenobi, not Obi-Wan. So but...
Well, here's an interesting thing that I meant to tell you actually off the show, but it's great to tell you actually on the show, is that they canonized the explanation of how he came to be known as Ben. It was something to do with Satine. I can't remember what it was. It was either her name or something. It was like a
pet name, or
it was either like a pet name, or it was somebody that she knew or something like that. And in order to honor her, he adopted the name Ben. That was, and apparently this has been canonized, probably in one of the comics.
But yeah, see, and this is the cool thing, and this is why I love the fact that they brought the Inquisitors in, because I really think, especially with Order 66 being what it was, right? And they're still hunting Jedi. So once again, you have 3 powerful Force users basically running around. You got Obi-Wan, you got Luke, and you have Leia. So if they if the Inquisitors visit Tatooine, they probably would feel, unless Obi-Wan can mask his presence and Luke's, unless he can do that, they will kind of feel that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, because what's his name?
Boy, we're really on fire today.
I know. Luke, I mean, not Luke, but Leia's adopted father.
Oh.
No, Leia's adopted father.
Bail
Organa, right. Okay, so because the Organas are political figures, right? And they're, they probably have to be at different, things, because at the start of A New Hope, remember, they were talking about, they were still having these political things. Even in Rogue One, they was like, well, there is no Death Star, this was a mining accident. They were still trying to kind of hide things from the people, because there still were remnants of that old Republic, not old Republic, but the Republic was that faction was still kind of prevalent
Well, yeah, the
as far as the
government was
Imperial.
actually still intact. It just was now an imperial thing instead. But the overall,
Yeah,
so instead of the Galactic Senate, it became the Imperial Senate.
right.
So even though it was
It's
functioning under an empire, it was like they still somewhat kept that structure.
right. And so by them being still members of that, Leia walking around with her parents, once again, somebody could sense her, but because even though she may be using the Force inadvertently, and because she's a child of the Force, is really strong with her. So that's going to radiate. And if I'm an Inquisitor looking and I'm searching in the Force all the time looking for Jedi, I feel it. There's a strong presence coming from somewhere. Who is it? And I keep feeling it around this little girl. Hmm.
Well,
Maybe we need to
that was
kidnap this girl.
addressed
You know what I'm saying?
because,
That would make
well, yeah,
sense.
because the whole thing is, and this has been brought up several times, how come Vader didn't ever sense it? I mean, he was
Right.
right there. She was kidnapped, and and obviously it's like, you're not on some mercy mission this time, Your Highness. It's like they were familiar with each other. Like Vader and Leia totally knew each other.
Well, they did, but see, I think at that point, they figured like, okay, one, Vader wasn't looking for any Jedi. He wasn't in the Force looking for any Jedi at the time he was dealing with Leia. So he probably
Yeah,
didn't.
but
But you would
remember
always think
that
you
when
would.
Obi-Wan, though, was on there, he wasn't looking for anything. All of a sudden, he's like, I sense something. Yeah, presence I haven't. Oh. Now, granted, that was more familiar to him. But this is
That.
where, this is where the whole fantasy thing comes into play, too, because there's a lot of times where he should have. And actually, in the book Darth Vader Rising, which was kind of like the expanded universe of the Lords of the Sith book,
Mhm.
they dealt with that, where Vader actually did feel a Force presence around her, but he wasn't really sure what it was, and they basically wrote it as he didn't really trust what he was feeling too much. And he didn't really necessarily target it towards her. He thought maybe there was something else going on or whatever. But at least they attempted to explain it. See, that was the thing that I
Mhm.
actually liked.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, that's really going to be interesting to see if they fix any of these plot holes or any of these different things um in Kenobi.
Well, there's a lot of
But
things that are
yeah,
going on. I mean, for one thing, I forgot who it was. One of the co-stars or something just said that this whole thing is just going to blow you away. Now, granted, some people had said the
they
same
said
thing
about
about the
everything.
Book of Boba Fett too, but I I would tend to believe it for this because as I was watching this second trailer that came out, that again, I'm not 100% certain it's official. It
Mhm.
looked official, but they were giving away a lot of things that I'm like, I don't know if they would necessarily be showing this if it was an official trailer. But either way, it definitely had some footage from the show. Of that, there's no doubt. And so I remember telling my coworker, who also actually happens to be a viewer of ours sometimes and a subscriber. We thank Doug for that. Doug was basically working next to me today, and I was watching the trailer, and I was just like, man, I'm really looking forward to this show because I always have been. I mean, anybody that's watched us
Mhm.
knows I've been wanting this thing ever since it was a rumored trilogy of films. And
Mhm.
and so the more that I see it though, the more that it's becoming into a reality. First of all, I think it's actually exceeding my expectations. And my expectations were pretty high. Especially once Ewan McGregor definitely agreed to come back. And then of course there was a thing that came out today too that Ewan McGregor is willing to do more Star Wars beyond the Obi-Wan series,
Mhm.
which tells me that I mean, he always enjoyed playing the role, but it definitely tells me that he enjoyed the experience of making this series, which to me is
Yeah.
further proof that it's going to be pretty good.
Well, I mean, I even love the fact that this was really cool to read is that like the moment where he actually confronts Vader again, like he was actually
Yes,
scared.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
like the fact that he was actually like freaked out, like literally because
Well, even the way
okay,
they
he's used to working
described
with
it,
Hayden,
right?
but yeah, it's the fact that like he's seeing him he's never seen him in the suit though.
Sure,
Like
he's
he's
never
actually
faced
going up
Vader.
against. He's never faced Vader before in any of the films in the suit. So now that he's like walking up on him, it's like, man, like it's like menacing. Like, he's kind of like the boogeyman in a way.
Well, especially the way
And
they described it, right? I think they described something like he comes up behind him and then he turns around and he's facing Vader, and it's just like, okay, I really want to see this scene now.
I know, right? Especially that little leak scene we saw when he like massively force pushes Obi-Wan. It's like,
Oh yeah, which kind of
all
reminded me
right,
of when Yoda pushed the Emperor.
yeah.
It,
Or even when they did it, when they even fought on Mustafar though, because they still had
mm,
that whole when they both force push each other at the same time.
yeah, but that almost was because it was like a doubling of kinetic energy. This
True.
really reminded me of the Yoda Emperor thing because he just, I mean, first of all, that was,
Unleashed.
I mean, that was just one
Yeah,
of the coolest scenes ever because
absolutely.
they needed to show how powerful Yoda was, and Yoda was not scared at all. In fact, at first, he was even toying with Palpatine. Like, all
Hmm.
right, man. I know you're probably used to facing, some of these other guys, but you're facing me now.
Hmm.
And it was
You're
just
so powerful
great.
you are. Why leave? I mean,
Yeah.
that was just like one of the
Yeah.
greatest lines.
Oh,
Also,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and
I
the look on
mean,
his face when he delivered that line too. Like, I'm not playing with you.
yeah, I'm
I
not
was just
playing with
like,
you. It's kind of like, because he
all right.
basically went there like, look, okay, I'm going to end this guy, basically. And I
Well,
mean,
even the fact that
still,
how he walked into the room though, like he just walks in, throws the the guards into the
that was the
wall.
scene I was going to bring up. To me, that is actually one of the coolest scenes in the entire franchise, is when he walks in, flicks his wrist, and completely incapacitates the royal guards. I mean, that
Hmm.
whole scene, I mean, everything about that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And it's those kind of moments that I'm looking forward to seeing again in this series. And I actually think that we're going to get some things like that.
Brings me up to another person. I think we're going to see Palpatine.
Yeah, it
I
would,
think he might make a cameo.
it would, I'm at the point now, especially seeing where the story is going, that it would almost not make sense if he weren't there.
Hmm.
It would be, well, let's put it this way. It would be a very conspicuous absence if he weren't
Yeah.
there. And look, I felt this way about Darth Vader at one point too, because I remember when the show was first announced and they started giving us details. You and I both were concerned because it's like, okay, I remember how we were framing it too. We said, okay, Vader's got to be used very sparingly, and you don't want to ruin anything that happened
Totally.
in A New
Yeah.
Hope, and they don't even really need Vader anyway. It's just they're just doing it for fan service, and so if they're gonna do it, they just need to. I mean, it makes sense because I remember we did a whole show on that too, where it basically makes sense for him to be there, but it's completely not necessary. Well, now I've completely changed my mind about that. The more that I've learned about the direction they're going in this, I mean, it's vital that Vader is in this. And now, the way that I used to feel about Vader is the way that I feel about Palpatine. I think he needs to be there, but I think he just needs to be there to bridge or maybe to set up certain, elements of the story, I guess, would be the best way to put it.
Like even if it's just dispatch, like okay, maybe it's just to dispatch Vader. Like, you know what? The Inquisitors have failed Vader. You must now go and face your old master. And
Mhm.
vanquish him for good, or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, even if it's just that, just knowing that okay, he's aware, he was present, and you know he even gave a little order at that point. But yeah, I think Palpatine, Watto. We already talked about Leia. Of course, we are
Qui-Gon.
going to see Luke, Qui-Gon. So and these are people who are very pivotal in the process of Obi-Wan becoming who he is.
Well, and again, I think that we have to also this is a good time since we're, maybe probably a little over the halfway point of our show. This is a good time to once again establish a few of the ground rules of what we're talking about here. We're not necessarily talking about the actual cast members. We know Vader's going to be in it. We know Luke's going to be in it. These are more than cameos. This is not what we're counting for this show. What we're counting is usually, with maybe a few exceptions, characters that haven't actually been announced to be in the show. So in other words, they're not part of the announced cast. But they may make an appearance, whether it's a brief appearance or perhaps a series of appearances. Like, I can see Qui-Gon periodically appearing, and keeping in mind this is only a 6-episode show. But I could see Qui-Gon maybe popping up 2 or 3 times in this. I don't necessarily think that the cameo has to be one and done. And certainly, even though I think that when people think of cameos, they think of it as just like a very brief glimpse, kind of like when Chopper was in Rogue One. I think that that's what most people think of as a cameo, or when C-3PO was in Rogue One with R2. It's just a very brief, quick scene. And yes, that definitely constitutes a cameo. However, a cameo appearance could also be just maybe an appearance that's limited in scope. So maybe it's not just one, it's just they're peppered throughout the show. And that's where I think that Qui-Gon and Palpatine in particular fit in, and perhaps even Leia too.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just has, like you said, be a one and done thing, but you just have to use people, it's almost kind of like how Vader was in Rogue One. Like, he was kind of more kind of a cameo in a way, because he kind of had really like one scene with
I would agree.
And you didn't see him really until the end.
Yes.
I mean, so that's kind of the same way.
No, absolutely. I would totally consider that a cameo. Yeah, completely. I mean, and again, I mean, you could actually probably do a whole show on a cameo versus an appearance versus, I mean, it's kind of like, when does it cease to be a cameo and you're actually a limited cast member? Because there's a lot of people who are listed in the cast who maybe only make a couple of appearances, but they're officially a part of it.
Right. Well, I have one more person that I can think of that would be, we could get a.
Oh, I've got 6. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
It's like, that's it?
Well, by all means, please.
Yeah, right. But, the rest of the show will be led by me.
Exactly. I doff my hat to you, sir.
Exactly.
No, but the other person I think would be Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan.
That would be interesting.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why I think that would be interesting.
Because the whole Duchess Satine thing and they being
sisters.
And
yes, there is that connection. And I wasn't going from that standpoint, although that's actually a really good point. Like, well, okay, let me back up. That's the reason why I could see her being in Obi-Wan specifically.
Right.
Because here's the thing. You have to look at it, and this is really more the point that I was going to make with it, was I could see them setting up and connecting. Because remember, I think that one of the things that you and I both agreed on was the fact that they are finally connecting the franchise. They're connecting the universe. They're connecting the storylines. It used to be that you had the books, you had the comics, you had the films, and you had the animated shows. And they would reference each other. But they were still pretty compartmentalized. The books were taking a certain, I guess, set of storylines. And same thing with the films, same thing with the animated shows and comics as well. But now you're literally seeing crossovers. And I think that that's what is refreshing to see in the series. Is it literally something will start in the comics and then make its jump to television. Or vice versa. And everything is referencing. They might start something in an animated series, and then it might pick up in a live action show, and then continue further into a comic book. I mean, it's really cool how they're now, instead of compartmentalizing sets of storylines in each of the mediums, what they're actually doing is taking chunks of one big story arc and dividing it up between the various forms. And so with the Bo-Katan thing, I think it would be cool because, like you said, there is that connection with Duchess Satine and Obi-Wan and all that. But beyond that, beyond the way that it just serves the show itself, I think that's a great way to connect Obi-Wan to The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I mean, and then I know I said, that was going to be my last one, but I did think of another. Really, I did think of two, but one was kind of like a piggyback off the one we said with Leia. Because of Leia, we're probably going to see Bail Organa again.
Oh, without question.
You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Because they kind of go together. I really didn't, But the other one I just thought of was Ahsoka. We might see Ahsoka just, because they might run into each other just in their travels. Because, he's looking for Leia or something like that, or he's on some mission. He might run into Ahsoka or whatever, and they might have like a quick word or, like, what are you doing here? And it's like, oh, well, I'm looking for, I'm on business.
I wouldn't mind that because Obi-Wan takes place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. Takes place, I don't know, I don't remember the exact time, but it's something like 6-7 years before, say, Rebels. And so it would connect those, because Ahsoka's in that.
Well, the reason why I would ask, I would want that to be brought up, because maybe it might lend us a clue as to where she was during the original trilogy. So that might answer that question in that particular.
Yes, and I do think it's important that they address where are all these people, because one of the things that The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett brought up is that if you're Luke Skywalker at this point, you got to be like, hey, where were all you guys when I needed you? I could have used your help going up against the Emperor and Vader. Now there's all these Jedi suddenly coming out of the woodwork. It's, hey, did you guys not hear of the ongoing issue with this Galactic Empire?
Right.
So, yeah, I think they do need to address that. I think that they need to at least give us a glimpse of where they are and what they're doing. Because it's not like, take Ahsoka, for instance. They don't have to tell us through any of the form, whether it's books or comics or whatever, or the shows. They don't have to sit there and go, okay, this is what Ahsoka was doing during A New Hope, and this is what she's doing during Empire. We don't need all that. If you just show us, because we already have her in Rebels, so we kind of have an idea. You can make that connection between Rebels and The Mandalorian and kind of figure out between what's going on with her in those two shows and just basic conclusion on what she's doing during the original trilogy. If you add another point to this little map and put her in Obi-Wan, you can really then follow a trajectory that would then make sense on why we don't see her during the original trilogy. And again, this is something that you have to do. When a franchise is 40, 50 years old, you have to start understanding that just by nature of it being around so long and more stories are being told, there's going to start to become, you're going to get plot holes, you're going to get stuff like that, especially when you consider the fact that a big chunk of this came out of the mind of one guy. And he's not going to think of everything, Right. So I think that something, and it's Star Trek, since we made the joke that we always reference that, Star Trek kind of had the same issue for a while because Gene Roddenberry was very much the George Lucas of that franchise. And much like Lucas, Roddenberry wanted to control pretty much every aspect of the storytelling. The only difference is because it got its start in episodic television, by nature, you had a franchise that had multiple writers. Whereas you didn't really have that. I mean, sure, you had Lawrence Kasdan that that basically wrote the script. So there are similarities, in The Empire Strikes Back and stuff like that. So there are some similarities, but still, you had a chunk of this thing coming from one guy, and then you start introducing a bunch of storytellers, and it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? So yeah, I agree. I think that putting Ahsoka in this show makes sense. And if they do it in a way that they don't overuse her, pretty much like what they did with The Mandalorian, I think that would be perfect.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very valid trajectory to kind of really use, because you kind of do have to explain, like, okay, well, like you said, like Luke will be like, okay, what the heck were you?
That
So
would be
either
my
you're going to
first
explain
question.
it, either going to explain that in Obi-Wan, or you're going to explain that in the Ahsoka series, which is going to come out. But at some point, it needs to be addressed. It's just a matter of when you choose to do so.
Right. But we'll have to see. I could see, again, it's not necessary, and I'm the last person that wants to see 1 million people crammed into this thing. I don't want it to be a Batman thing. But I could see Mon Mothma actually making a cameo. Again, cameo, we're talking a single few minute appearance here.
A little Boba Fett moment.
Yeah.
In Empire.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that brings up a good point too. She doesn't necessarily have to say anything, because we know that the Empire is, or not the Empire, the Rebellion is basically taking shape. Now, we know that it's not until Rogue One that the Rebellion becomes what we know, as we know in A New Hope and beyond. We know that still, even during the time of Obi-Wan, it's still more or less in its infancy. It's a series of almost terrorist attack type of thing. But I don't know. Now, Voyager asks a really interesting question. He says, are you going to have a watch party for Obi-Wan? How do you usually watch these episodes? Do you make it an event? Yeah,
No, actually, usually he and I just kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
say,
I hate to like break it to you, man.
Usually we watch them together. I mean, if we can,
if we can, yeah, we'll watch them together. I mean, a lot of times the way that it's worked is we've watched them together, but in a lot of cases, The Mandalorian, I think we did for the most part.
Yeah.
There were some, like, I remember the season finale for season 2, though, the big Luke Skywalker moment. We didn't watch that one together.
Yeah, together. No, but that was because I remember you saw it before I did.
Right. The Book of Boba Fett, I'm pretty sure we didn't watch any of that together.
Nope.
Visions, we didn't watch together.
Nope. By together, we mean like in the same room.
Yeah, in the same room.
Like,
right.
Not like he watched it like 6 months and then I watched it,
Yeah, I mean, because
6 months later or something like that.
Well, because the thing is, generally what we do, and this is what we're going to do for Obi-Wan. Now, of course, Voyager does bring up some things that I had been thinking about, because a lot of it is scheduling.
Yeah.
On the other hand, say the thing comes out on Wednesday, which is traditionally what the stuff has been. It used to come out on Fridays, which of course is really tough, because what would happen is if we're reviewing it, we would try to review it that day, right? So it's like we'd have to hurry up and try to get home from work, watch the thing, take as many notes as we can, either mentally or on paper, and then spit out a show on it. So then what we decided to do is, and of course, like we said in the beginning, we're a spoiler channel. There's no such thing as a non-spoiler review for anything for us. So out of respect for fans, what we did was we started waiting till Monday. And that's one of the primary reasons why we added our Monday live streams, was because we thought, okay, the Friday stuff could be the more topical, news-oriented stuff that people are talking about. And then the Monday shows, we can make more like our reviews. Maybe we start talking about more philosophical things, special topics. Yeah, character analysis, that kind of thing. So that's how we've been doing it. Now, The watch party thing seems kind of interesting. The only problem is, and of course we've done this for our Thanksgiving specials, where the first 2 years ago we did a Thanksgiving special where we actually had our good friend and another viewer, Dave Cossey, join us, and we actually watched, where we had it, you know, kind of like in this view, right? So where you see the graphic is where you would actually see the show, and then we would be in our little boxes and we would actually just watch the thing in real time and comment on it. The problem is, of course, as we found out when we started doing the Family Guy thing last year, YouTube was just all over us on that. So what we'll more than likely do is probably make a show for this Thanksgiving, because we'll probably try to do something Dark Side, but we might have to actually put that one on Vimeo and then just give everybody the link or something and get around it that way. The watch party thing, though, would actually be kind of cool. That would be interesting. I'd like to do that because I like the idea of watching the thing in real time and then commenting on it with our viewers, because that's much like our Friday and our Monday shows are sort of like we're just getting together with our community and talking about Star Wars. How cool would it be to actually sit down and watch these shows with you guys? So it's not even just a review. It's like we're actually watching it in real time. But as far as how we usually do it, usually what happens is we try to watch them together if we can, because we'd have the weekend to do it. If not, we watch them when we can, and then we get together on our Monday show and we do a review. And while the show is on, just like we just did with the Book of Boba Fett, every Monday we would review the latest episode that came out the previous Friday or Wednesday or whatever it was. So that's generally how we try to do it. And yeah, it would be cool. I mean, to make it an event, you know, I'd have to look into exactly the best way to do it without getting the copyright strike. So if Voyager, if anybody else wants to maybe put in the comments section the best way to handle that, to where we could actually make a watch party somehow, you know, I'm not really sure what we could show, what we can't, but if we did it live, I mean, I'd be all about it. Because that's what's so fun. That's the reason why we actually stopped doing the whole recording the episodes and then putting them out every Friday. We started doing the live streams because we actually like that interaction between us and you guys. So it's not just you guys watching us discuss a particular topic in Star Wars. You're literally discussing it with us in real time. And I think that that's just the coolest way to do it. But yeah, you know, that'd be pretty cool. And, you know, we have a little bit of time to figure it out.
Figure it out.
It's not like the thing's premiering next week or something.
And tomorrow night or something stupid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Or we have to scramble to do it. Because I remember I was just going to do that with you, actually. I remember even just doing it the traditional way, right? Where we watch it and then because a lot of times if we can't get together, either at our office that we share, or, you know, you come over or whatever and we just do a pizza, you know, Star Wars thing. I mean, even when we couldn't do that, I was trying to see if we could do like a watch party kind of thing. So instead of us watching it on our own, even if it wasn't practical for one of us to come over to the other one, you know, it'd be kind of cool to do the watch party thing. Because I love the whole watch party. I mean, ever since that stuff came out, I thought that was a great way. You know, you can share movies or whatever with your friends.
Yeah, that came out during the pandemic. That's one of the cool things that the pandemic brought us. That, you know, families couldn't get together and watch movies and stuff, so they made it a way so they could do the whole watch party thing. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's a great suggestion of Voyager. We will definitely look into that.
Yeah, you know, we'll look into it. And like I said, I mean, if you or, you know, anybody else actually has any idea technologically the best way to do it, Because there's a lot of different ways that you could technically do it, but what's the best way to do it? What's the way
Without
other
getting
people are
flagged.
doing it without getting without getting flagged? Because even some of the I think I even got flagged on it. Like, they didn't give us an actual copyright strike, but they did give us like something on even a trailer or whatever that we showed, and it's like it's on YouTube, it's on your channel already. Because that's one of the ways that a lot of these reaction channels get around it, right? They make sure that whatever the source material they're using, it's already on YouTube. And generally that helps the process, but... But I mean, as far as some of these other cameos go, because I know we kind of got off track on that one. I think that it's going to be interesting to see if Mon Mothma pops up, because again, it's kind of like what we were saying before we got off on the whole watch party thing. They don't necessarily even have to be speaking roles, right? They could basically just be there to bridge certain elements of the story that will then lead us to Rogue One or lead us to A New Hope or whatever the case may be. It kind of makes me wonder if they're going to do the typical, you can't really have R2 or 3PO unless they're independent of Obi-Wan. Because I wonder if they're going to do that. Because it was really strange that Obi-Wan, and of course the explanation is Obi-Wan pretended not to know R2 when he met him in A New Hope, but it's like, we need more than that, in my opinion.
Well, he really didn't. I mean, because the way Luke, see, the thing about Obi-Wan is, as we've learned, he's a great master of
Yes.
yes, word technicality.
Yeah.
So, because Luke came up to him, he said, I think this droid belongs to him. He said, I don't recall owning,
That's true. He was kind of
wasn't
coy about the whole thing.
It wasn't his. It was Anakin's.
Yeah.
R2 was Anakin's droid.
It's he's getting him on that certain point of view thing.
That's the view. Yeah, it's the technicality.
Because it's true. It's not like he just never really alluded to the prior relationship. And there is that thing where R2 and Obi-Wan were talking while Luke was sort of knocked out when he was coming to. So I just wonder if there's going to be anything that connects that part of it. I mean, again, that could almost borderline on fan service, but it does make me wonder, though. Like, I think that would be kind of cool in a way. But I just don't know as far as, we had the official cameos that have been somewhat announced, or at least softly announced. Then we've come up with some cameos that we think are likely to be in there. And then, of course, now we've just wrapped up the cameos that we're like, okay, I mean, it's not necessarily likely, but it would make sense. Let's put it that way. It would make sense. It would make sense if Mon Mothma was in it. It would make sense if Ahsoka was in it. It would make sense. I'm trying to think of anybody else that's kind of like that could actually... I mean, you can have Tarkin in there, too. Yeah, I think that makes sense. In this trailer that I saw that I'm not really sure is 100% official, there was a thing where Obi-Wan was actually looking out over the horizon and he saw the half-completed Death Star, which I thought was kind of cool. So, we'll see if that's actually a thing. To me, it's like it could either be a thing or it could be somebody who cleverly basically took the half-completed Death Star from Return of the Jedi and shoved it in there, So we'll have to see. Voyager says, is Alec Guinness a cameo? So this is actually an interesting question because it depends on how much footage they had from A New Hope and whether or not they can, in other words, do they do a Carrie Fisher kind of thing that they did in Rise of Skywalker, where they just repurpose some old footage, and when the show's over, do they flash an old Obi-Wan? I don't think so, because I just don't think that the footage would exist that would make sense.
Yeah.
And it would depend on how far in time they want to go, right? Because we know that the show takes place 10 years after A New Hope, which would put it about 9 years before... before A New Hope, 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. So it's kind of in that midway point. So the only way I could see them doing an Alec Guinness thing would, number one, they would have to, being that he's been dead since 99 or 2000 or something, they would, or maybe early 2000, he died sometime between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Because I remember he actually was around when the Obi Wan game came out for Xbox. But then he I think that was it. I think once he saw that, he was just like, I'm out. Because the problem that he was having, right, was that Star Wars is a relatively dead issue. And then when they started coming out with Phantom Menace and his character was back, fans started pestering him again. And he just really, I mean, you thought Harrison Ford was grumpy.
Yeah.
Alec Guinness was really grumpy. And the thing that's funny about that is that one of the things that Alec Guinness did that was brilliant was he got a percentage of the gross of the film. Because Lucas couldn't really afford to pay him a ton of money. So Alec Guinness, much like everybody else, thought that this was going to be some nothing stupid movie. So he took a percentage of the gross, which of course nobody thought that Star Wars was going to do anything. Well, it made him a multi-million, I mean, he probably already was, but it added to his bank account in a big way, let's put it that way. So, you would think that he would just be like, and be all about it. But yeah, he wasn't at all. But I say all that to say that if they had some footage maybe that wasn't used or something, or maybe even if they wanted to put something in there that was from A New Hope or whatever, if they wanted to kind of fast forward in time, right? So it's like the last scene. Kind of like what they did in Rebels, where you basically fast forwarded to, Tatooine, and you saw that final duel between Maul and Obi Wan. And by the way, that's another cameo that people were speculating about, was Darth Maul. Because there were those reports that Maul was supposed to be the main villain instead of Vader. But that didn't end up panning out. And in fact, Deborah Chow actually denied it. She denied that was even a thing. According to her, Maul was never going to be the main villain in Obi-Wan. However, that said, that does not mean that it wouldn't make perfect sense for Maul to have a cameo. Especially because during this time period, he's heading up Crimson Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see.
Yeah.
All right, but you guys...
it's not about us.
It's not about us. You guys know exactly what we're thinking. The question is, what are you guys thinking? Who do you think will make a cameo appearance? And then, of course, from all the... many characters that we just brought up, go ahead and break it down for us. Give us a percentage. What percentage of a chance do you think we'll see Qui-Gon or Leia or any of the people that we mentioned? So we mentioned quite a bit, actually. Mm-hmm. So we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear, who do you guys think has the best chance of making a cameo appearance in Obi-Wan? And whether we do a watch party or whatever, you can bet that we're definitely going to review the show when it comes out. And between now and the time that it comes out, there's going to be news that we're going to be covering probably on one of our shows up until then. So you'll want to watch for that. And Monday, you're definitely going to want to watch when we do the show finally on Is Palpatine a Sith Heretic? Because there has been a lot of talk that he's not really a Sith Lord per se, but he's a Sith Heretic. So we'll go into what that all means and break it down for you. And then, of course, hopefully discuss it with you guys and get your thoughts on it. So you're definitely going to want to watch us Monday night at 8. And, of course, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if nothing else, because it really does help us. So until Monday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.